Hi folks, welcome to another edition of AKS Me Anything. Today we're here with João. You might remember a few editions back we actually had PKC talking to us a little bit about what the EEE team, the Embedded Escalation Engineers, at Microsoft, and João is one of them. And we now know that that team is responsible for kind of taking on some of the last types of support cases when they were escalated by frontline support engineers, and they are embedded with us in the product team to get some of those issues in depth and go into the code and see what happens there. What are some of the last things that you remember that you worked on? I'm curious about it.
Thanks for having me, first of all, right? It's a lot of fun to be here. Great fan of the show.
Good.
George Rogan. Well, PKC brought, great points. The EEE is in fact the last line of defense before we reach engineering. Our work is, I would say, half reactive, half proactive, right? We do work on those incidents. Now, to answer your question, from top of mind, I do remember a couple of them which were, kind of interesting. We were just talking about Windows with some folks here, and, Windows needs some love, which...
saying that from Microsoft is surprising.
Exactly. We love Windows and we love Linux, right? So one of these incidents that was really fun to work on, I remember was related to the group managed service accounts for Windows. Mm-hmm. I was working on an incident where...
For friends, we call them GMSAs.
Yeah, GMSAs. I didn't want to use the acronym.
No, it's great. It's great.
But the thing was, this was for an enterprise customer, and they were trying to enable GMSA, and they were just getting, an ambiguous error, like I can't remember from top of mind, but something about the directory is not available, something of the sort, mm-hmm. Right? And there was a lot of back and forth in trying to understand what was happening here, and we're talking about an enterprise customer, so naturally they had a complex network scenario with UDRs, VGPs, so mm-hmm. Naturally routes being advertised via VGP and learned via VGP, that is. And one of the things that was funny was it took us a while to actually, ask the customer to enable DNS query logging at the core DNS level, okay, right, to get something out of it. And then we were able to find that, interestingly enough, since the customer had such a large environment with a lot of domain controllers, the query actually got truncated with because UDP has 512 byte limit on it, right? So it got truncated, which prompted core DNS to retry in TCP, but the customer had the DNS queries locked only for UDP, right?
Right.
So that failed. And because that failed, the overall
and so what happens is it ended up being a GMSA issue that, of course, it's always DNS, and
of course it's always networking.
And then in that case, it was trying to query the domain controllers.
Yeah, it was trying to get a list,
as it does, trying to find the directory.
Right.
But there were so many domain controllers, right, that it were actually the response was so large that it was getting truncated.
Yeah,
and it was trying to fall back to TCP,
and that was failing. Right. And that took us a while, right? That took us a while because this is kind of, the things that very early on seem fine in terms of configuration. Like, hey, it's DNS, it's UDP, right? They only have UDP, so I have no... And for enterprise customers, usually there's the challenge of every little change is almost like a change request needed, right? You have the appropriate team that needs to make this change. So we need to...
Very regulated, like, environments and organizations.
Right. So we need, when we come to them, we can't go on a hunch, like, oh, I think this is it, so go ahead and unblock this for the sake of unblocking.
Just try it.
Yeah, exactly. See where the ship's falling. So we need to, hone in and get really precise root cause on what was causing it, and that turned out to be it, right? That was one of the incidents. It took a while, but it was fun to work on. This is the sort of incident that we get.
That must have been fun, packet captures, trying to understand what happened from there. And how did you know from before you started that the customer was blocking TCP?
Well, we do have that information, but it was something that we kind of overlooked in the very beginning because it's not something that...
Why would that matter?
It's not something that you see every day, right?
Right.
So I I haven't seen a fallback like this required on Linux, for instance.
Yeah.
Right. So that's sometimes these kind of things throw us off.
The differences between the OSs are also
Yeah.
interesting across the
Right.
board.
Right.
That's really cool. It's really cool. So that's kind of reactive.
That is.
Talk to me
yeah.
a bit about proactive. What have you been doing there?
Proactive is an entire different ballgame, I would say. So something that we
Let's
do,
maybe explain for people that might have not seen PKC's
right.
kind
right.
of edition. So proactive is basically how we try to have the customer help themselves.
Exactly,
way?
exactly, right. So that's a portion of our work. We try to, for one, do trend analysis. Like we look at the cases from a holistic point of view, try to categorize them first, which, to be completely fair, was a bit of a pain point before AI. There were a lot of manual work involved, trying to understand exactly where the biggest issues were, what the volume were, and what, if anything that we could do to help not only customers but our engineers as well. Because he talked about the shift left methodology. That's something that we always try to use and try to look at it from that perspective. Meaning that when we're getting an escalation and an ICM, first, is there a pattern to it, right? Is there something that's been driving these ICMs? ICM meaning incidents, that's the platform we use. So if there's no pattern, right, why did our support engineers, why were they unable to solve the issues or get there? So are we lacking some sort of readiness? Are we lacking tools? What could we improve?
Oh, very interesting. So you're focused as well on not just mitigating the issue, but also figuring out why it wasn't caught sooner.
Right.
And
That's
fixed
correct.
sooner as well. Okay.
That's a big part. That also comes into play our partnership with engineering, of course. But on this side of, let's call it the aisle, right? What I'm talking about right now is, it ends up being a bit reactive in the sense that we try to prevent future incidents. So those incidents already occurred, and now can we deflect further of future incidents, right?
You definitely don't want to have to say the same thing twice or have the same issue.
Right. Yeah. And the way we do it is, well, we either build automation. PKC talked about the diagnose and solve plate. That's something that we can talk about as well. So we have a lot of automations built on top of our internal supportability tools, on our data sets that we have, where we try to pick up on these issues, right? And we try to surface them to both support engineers and customers alike. So if the customer can use the self-help content that we have for them and tools, to the point where they don't have to raise a support ticket to find out something that's wrong with their cluster or prevent something from happening, well, that's a win for us. That's something that
That's great.
we try to do. Yeah,
that's great. How do you envision AI to help with that?
That's a great question. Straight to the jugular. AI is all the rage these days, right? Yeah. So obviously we know supportability is no exception. For one, we started out using these LLMs to do some sort of case analysis I've mentioned, right? Which has been a big help in trying to in helping us establish priorities, right? Where do we go next? And for instance, CRUD has and continues to be one of our main drivers. In terms of issues.
So that's everything about creating clusters,
right?
Updating
Especially
them, all the operations.
Not only, but exactly. Like cluster upgrades, even deletes. We see a lot of volume, and PKC did speak about some of the error code. Sometimes it's just that a error code that we surface isn't descriptive enough, right? And that could be something that could be worked on, or sometimes it's something else entirely. Sometimes there's some internal blocker for whatever reason, right? Because AKS is a very, very large service, a very large project that collaborates and integrates with other resource providers, right? So sometimes, and not to shift blame, but sometimes it's something else, right? Maybe the create or the delete failed because of something else that's not our responsibility. But we may know what it is and how to fix it, right? And if that's the case, how can we empower customers to self-deflect, right? Whether it's a button that we can put in our Azure portal or whatever on Azure CLI that can be used to mitigate those issues.
And you'd see things like the Azure Copilot, etc., being kind of tools that customers would also use to find those exact buttons, to find what those codes mean and things like that.
Yeah, that's a great question. That's something that we are working on right now. So our team, we largely serve as liaisons between the different teams. And right now we have this project ongoing where we're partnering with the Azure Portal team as well as the AKS Engineering for Observability team, to be more precise, where we're integrating the tools that we have available internally to our support engineers that handle all sort of detection for cluster issues and prevention as well. And we're integrating this with our Copilot LLM on the Azure portal, with obviously the objective is for to help customers be able to find those issues quickly, and be able to mitigate those. Another thing is the nudges we may have seen on the Azure portal. We start seeing popping up on the managed cluster blades, like little nudges with little recommendations and such. And this is also something that's a part of that. So we're trying to proactively, let's say if an upgrade fail, right, for whatever reason, like maybe it was an extension error, maybe it was something else, restrictive PDBs, before we wait for you to start a new support request experience, or maybe even open Copilot to ask about it, we want to pre-populate these nudges, letting you know, like, hey, this happened, right? Click here to know more, to diagnose.
Kind of context-aware.
Yeah, absolutely, right. Context-aware, yeah, that's the word for it. And something that I find deeply interesting is that we are onboarding more and more tools into Copilot, so very soon we should be able to render graphs. So if you want to right out of the gate, from internal metrics, right? You want to see, maybe there's CPU pressure, or maybe not in the traditional sense. That's another fun one.
Port usage and things like that.
Right. So maybe from the guest OS perspective, everything is fine, but from a process stall information, it's not, right? So, and this is the sort of thing that we want to surface and provide recommendations, and with a click of a single button that we can display right there, you can fix our issues.
Without having to fiddle and have to search for it.
Exactly. One of the things that I'm also excited about using this is, because we've mentioned diagnose and solve, and a lot of customers use it with great success. But something that, because of the way that case categorization works, sometimes we kind of forced to show you a bunch of information that may or may not be relevant to your case. They're all relevant for sure, but they may not be exactly.
Yeah.
For that particular case, they may not be relevant. And what I'm really excited about AKS Copilot, or the Azure Copilot that we're using on the Azure portal, is that we now have a way, because of the LLM that's behind it, right, to extrapolate and hone in on exactly what the issue is and surface what matters and reducing the noise.
Very cool. Very cool. All right, that's awesome to both areas. Before we wrap up, since I have you here in the hot seat, I'd like to get your input on what are your, let's say, maximum 3 top recommendations, or maybe let's call them which customers you would like customers to do more of or less of to be more successful in AKS.
Okay.
Based on what you see.
In AKS.
Yes.
Okay. Wow. So I would say that one of the things that springs to mind, and we have a ton of cases about this, is overcommitted nodes. That's one of them. That's one of the causes that we do see.
So that's just nodes with where the components inside, the pods inside, are just requesting too many resources.
Right, where it may not be immediately visible, but then because of the limits defined, we may have a peak overcommitment of 300 or more %, and sometimes we can find issues occurring because of that. Something that personally I would encourage, in going back to my colleague PKC Pradeep that was speaking before, because we have to collaborate with different teams, right? Not only engineering, but I'll partner with other both engineering and support teams. Something that I feel goes a long way is whenever there's a support request, that customers be descriptive enough. Like, don't just tell, oh, my pod went down, right? Or my pod isn't able to connect to XYZ. Let us know, be descriptive, right? Give us a source, give us a destination. Do you have TCP dumps? Get us that information. If you don't, that's fine, but just tell us enough that we can go out of our way, and whenever we need to collaborate with different teams, nothing gets lost in the way. I think that's a big one, just because it saves time, it saves it's a source of frustration the way I see it for customers. Sometimes having to explain things different times to different people. And whenever we have a full set of information and maybe steps to reproduce an issue, if there such are available, that speeds up case resolution by a lot.
Right.
And last and not least, maybe more importantly, I would highly recommend, I'd love to see customers adopt and use Diagnose and Solve and Copilot more. It may not be in a perfect state, but I can guarantee that we're making improvements day by day, and it's going.
We already have high percentages of deflection based on that, which we call deflection. Essentially, every time that a user might have an issue and was able to find help and solve it by themselves,
right,
and not actually have to open a ticket and go through the motions of support. So that's very good. It's going to continue to be a never-finishing job of improving AI, of getting more things. Like it's like humans, right? You never stop learning, and neither does AI. But it's great to see already a lot of
with the landscape. It's hard to keep track of everything, right? Something that we're particularly excited about is Model Context Protocol, for instance, and how we can tie in and make it fully agentic. So there's a lot of exploration, a lot of trial and error as well.
Right.
But I think we're on the right track, and we're close to have something that's going to be really cool.
Very good. Careful with requests and limits. Make sure that you're providing, it's kind of like support prompt engineering. Make sure you're providing all the context.
Exactly. That's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
Make sure you're providing all the context. Repros are super helpful. It avoids all the having to share multiple times, and make sure you're using all the tools that we're now providing on support. Diagnose and Solve and Copilot. Great suggestions. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
João. It's a pleasure. For all of you back home, it was a pleasure having you attend another AKS Me Anything. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our AKS community, all full with videos like these and many more deep dives on features, events, and more. And let us know what you'd like to hear about next, and if you have any questions about this episode. Thank you very much.
Thank you.